On my far right, no political comments intended there, Mike Ellis. In the middle, Nansun, and then Greg Basser here on my right. I'm going to plunge straight in. I'm trying not to do long introductions. And ladies first, Nansun. Co-productions is a term that is used and abused all over the world, particularly in China, I think, because people have different definitions of it. And one of the things I've noticed over the last few years is that possibly the working definition of a co-production among Chinese filmmakers, let's say 5 years ago, was how to work with Hong Kong and Taiwan. Then there was a brief sort of flirtation, I think, perhaps with people looking at Europe. And in the last couple of years, the obsession, if I can call it that, is working with the US and in particular Hollywood. How do you define co-production in China?
Do you want the long version
or
the short version?
Give me the long version.
Actually, I started
we have 55 minutes.
I started my first co-production film with China in the early 90s. It's called New Dragon Inn, 新龙门客栈. In those days, the co-production, only state-owned studios, and I can't remember exactly the figure, something like 26 state-owned studios, many of whom had not made films in many years, because the economy and the whole film situation was not yet, was still in rather backward stage. And of the 26 studios, there were also quotas for each studio to make a film. And we can be very honest about it now. When you made a co-production contract at the time, supposedly the Chinese party has to put in money, and we put in some money. But of course, they never have any. At the time, the studios were not. Many of the studios were not doing well, and they had no money. So we made a co-production agreement according to the government's regulations. We submitted it. Then we make another agreement which said that actually you have no money. You didn't put any money into it, and so it's it's that kind of period. And I remember clearly when we went to shoot our first one was with Ermei Studios, and it's kind of in a remote part of China. And then we went there, and on the first, we had to bring a lot of people from Hong Kong, the more practiced crew members. But by agreement, we have to use some of the Ermei Studio people, but because then they can get a certain fee. You pay them a fee for the labor. And on the first day on set, you could see clearly who were the people working from Hong Kong, because they wore jeans and very good sturdy shoes. But then there were a number of people on set in their suits with ties. So those people are the people from the studio, because they thought it was a big day for them going to work on a set, so they have to dress properly. So that's really an aside, but I remember those days so clearly. And right after we finished that film, because when China opened up in terms of co-production, us as filmmakers, the wonderful thing was it opened up us. It made it possible for a lot of natural resources. I mean, in Hong Kong, we shot martial arts films for years. And we were very, very careful, and I think there's some websites which spot this. While you're fighting in costume on the valley, very far away in the hill, you can see a little red dot moving. That's a taxi, So there's a very limited place we can shoot. And you're always going back to the same valley, and then it was torn apart because the highway was built. So when China opened up, it was really wonderful for us, because suddenly we could go to the desert, which was really the desert in Louis Cha Jing Yong's book. Also, of course, it started giving us a lot of human resources as well. Artists, people who are production designers, who actually, we just read them off books, we can get production designers who lived in that environment. So very quickly from the first film, actually, we moved to Beijing to make Once Upon a Time in China Part 3. And the few people on set who were quite smart in the Ermei studios, you must remember this is early 90s, still people were attached to a working unit which would guarantee that you have insurance, you have a place to live, you have retirement. So a lot of people were still very much part of that system and were afraid to leap into something else. But a few smart ones were very fast, made a deal with the studio, and so they came with us to Beijing. Bought a pager. At the time, there were a pager, no phones yet, not so many. They bought a pager, and then before you know it, they were very, very busy, because if they were smart enough, then you moved very quickly. And those were the days when maybe on a set we would have about 200 people, and 120 would be from Hong Kong, and 80 would be from China. So we fast forward, as you know, in the last 10 years, China's industry has gone through tremendous progress in all aspects, in exhibition, in distribution, in production, because the government put in a number of policies and initiatives in 2001 and 2002, and really this took effect in 2003. And you can see, because the box office from 2003 to last year, every year had a double-digit growth. One year it was 60%, I think 62 or something. But more, on average, 30-something% a year, at minimum. Number of productions, film produced, went from 100 to last year at least about, figures in China are all a bit Chinese, so 500-something to maybe 600-something. That's because when we talk about co-productions, one of the initiatives that government put in was that you don't have to co-produce with state-owned studios anymore. You can do it with privately held companies, individuals, with certain qualifications, which was very, very easy. That's why there's this huge increase in numbers. I think still a lot of the successful co-production films, Chinese language, are usually the ones done with Hong Kong. Before I came, I just looked at some of the figures in the last 10 years. Of the top 10 Chinese language films, except for 1 year, there was 4, 5 of them were co-productions with Hong Kong. When you say the trend of sort of toying with co-production with Europe, I think what happened from my perspective is that when the China market started picking up, the Europeans European cinema, although I love it very much, a big part of it, in terms of the overall landscape of American films, still is relatively lower in terms of their returns, their influence, their box office worldwide. So I think the Europeans are much more keen to spot a new market and much more ready to come rushing in to see if they can somehow get a part of the action. The Americans, I think, are very successful, make very commercial films, but they're all very practical. They've seen this before. They've seen it in India. They've seen it in Russia. They'll say, well, it will fester for a few years before it really becomes real, so we can come in then, because they know they have the stars, they have the star directors, and if they want to, then something will happen. So I think that's why there's more Americans now, which of course, and at the same time, they want the market to mature more, which it has done, and it will continue to do so. And that's why there's this. But I think still a large part of it will be co-production because of Chinese language films with Chinese subject matters will still be with Hong Kong, because Hong Kong has a number of years, about 30 years of expertise, making films which are in line with the international market in terms of its finance, accounting. They understand how marketing is done, distribution is done. But I also look forward to genuine co-productions, and I keep reminding filmmakers, you can't just stick a star in there and say, this is a co-production, because you really, if you find a story which really truly embraces the 2 cultures or 3 cultures or whatever, how many number of cultures you want, and tell a compelling story, that still would make it a very good movie, and not just for the sake of co-production. Thank you.
Yeah, your voice is just giving out there after 10 minutes. Well, good you stopped there. And by the way, Brian, who's our house manager, the clock hasn't started ticking, for your information.
Just now was Twilight Zone.
Mike Ellis, if I can turn to you. Co-productions, particularly between the US and China, have been held up in the last few years as an alternative to the import quotas. China has, for many years, operated a system of import quotas on revenue-sharing films, which is seen by many people as an obstacle to getting films released in the country. So one of the alternatives was come and co-produce with us, then you can escape the quotas. I wonder if you could explain a little bit more on that, and now that the quotas on imports are changing, whether co-productions are now such a priority.
Escape the quotas, it sounds like a Hollywood movie already, doesn't it? The co-productions are done in limited numbers from the studios I represent. I think last year we did about 3 co-productions. The majority are really clearly Hong Kong. And our studios are in the business of making movies to make money. And of course, there's a cultural dimension to everything, and Nansun touched on that with the European push into many markets. Yes, it works outside the quota. You are treated as a foreign film. So if you work within the revenue sharing quota, the share that you take away is 25% of the gross box office. Whereas if you come in as a co-production, then you're entitled to share it the same way as though you were a local film. And that is at the moment 43, 45%. Depends what deal you do. But obviously, when I look at the statistics, and I just quickly pulled them up for this year, if you look at the average revenue for the top 10 Chinese films, it's about, it's around $20 million US, but a co-production, the average revenue is 34 million. But right now, the average revenue for a Hollywood film is 74 million. So 25% on 74 million, 43, 45 on 34 million, and the Hollywood studio is probably going to go down the route of getting in under the quota. But co-productions you do not just to make money, it's the relationship, it's the experience, the locations, the opportunity to work with amazing Chinese directors, producers, actors. So there's many good reasons to do co-productions, but it is another way of getting outside the quota.
And just to specifically slightly repeat myself there, because the quotas were stricter until February or March of this year. So there was quite an imperative to co-produce. Has that imperative gone away now?
No, the number of American co-productions that you see has remained pretty stable over the years. If you look back, it's sort of 3, 4 a year. Nothing has changed on that. It won't dilute the appetite to work with local producers, but it's got to make financial sense. It's got to be a business opportunity or a relationship opportunity that you want to work on long term. And some studios are more advanced than others. And anytime you release a film, the quote that somebody gave back to me: nobody sets out to make a bad film. It's always a risk. Co-productions is an extra risk. And the control is the budget. And I think if you look at co-productions and the revenue numbers, the Hong Kong film industry understands this marketplace. The top Chinese films, by and large, are Hong Kong co-productions, no question about it. Hong Kong makes amazing films, and I think combined with China and that market, it's a beautiful synergy.
I mean, it's interesting you say that the number of Hollywood China pictures has stayed pretty flat. We in the media are bombarded with companies announcing that they're doing this and that co-production, and some of them are not real.
The statement I say, another week, another film fund, another week, another co-production deal. I always look forward, I'm excited to hear it. I look forward to the end result. At the end of the day, for us, the end result is the film made? Is there a box office and an audience for it?
If I may add to that, I think for those who are not familiar with China, is that there was an incentive to do co-productions more because the revenue sharing, as was pointed out, before May this year was 13%, starts at 13%. So that has now gone up to 25%. I think that's a disincentive to do co-production, because when you go do co-production, you have to go through a lot of censorship issues. You have to submit your script for censorship, and you may have maybe given notes. And then after you shoot it, you still have to present it again for content and technical censorship. And the content censorship, you may still be asked to make changes. So now, with the revenue sharing being 25%, I think it's even less attractive because it's such a hassle,
And remember, the 43% is before tax and before P&A. So when you look at the gap,
it's smaller.
It's a lot lower. And the point you just made is the other one, which is you can't take a co-production and say, okay, I'm going to film it this way and I'll cut it for China, but show the full one outside of China. You can do the opposite. We make films in Hollywood. You can cut them for China and show them, but what you do for China, you can do the same or a subset. You can't say, hey, I'm going to have these things. So for English-speaking, wide-release films, I actually agree with you. The co-production isn't the way to go, I don't believe, unless you find something that really resonates as a Chinese story, where you can meld what's acceptable in China with the rest of the world. Obviously, that's not the route we're taking. But
I love it when panelists jump in and start arguing with each other already. Greg, you're running a large Asian or global conglomerate out of Australia. You have a Chinese implant, if I can call it that. You're making real co-productions, as you would define them. Yeah. What is Village Roadshow Entertainment Group Asia?
Well, probably best if I talk a little bit about Village Roadshow. We're an Australian company.
Right.
We have cinemas, distribution, theme parks. Until last year, we were a very large radio group. But we're also in the content business, and we've been making films in Hollywood. We've been making films probably for about 40 years. We've been making films in Hollywood, mainly with Warner Brothers, for the last 15 years. And they're sort of mainstream, wide-release films, whether it's The Matrix, Sherlock Holmes, Ocean's 11, those sort of wide-release films that we make all over the world. But as a group, we've been working in Asia probably for the last 40 years. We started distributing...
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know that.
Well, most people here will be familiar with Golden Village, for instance, which is a joint venture between Golden Harvest and ourselves. But we started distributing the Bruce Lee movies in Australia back in 1970. So we've got a 40-plus year history in the region. We started building multiplexes throughout Asia in 1988. The first one was opened with Yishun in 1992, which we still run with Golden Harvest. And I suppose that we've had a familiarity with the marketplace. We've distributed our films. We've distributed Chinese films in Australia and New Zealand. We've distributed our films through Golden Harvest and through Golden Village here into the region. And we've got a lot of visibility here as to the marketplace. I think the thing about Village is that we've always worked in partnerships. We've been Warner Brothers' partner for over 41 years. So we have a partnership approach wherever we go, whether it's cinema, whether it's theme parks, whether it's film production. So when we were looking at China, we saw this market growing, as was said before, Nansun said before. The market has grown at more than 30% compound annual growth for the last 6 or 7 years. You've now got a box office, it's the largest box office outside of North America, will be about 2.6, 2.8 billion this year. Even with the big step up in Hollywood production, you've still got a local production, or what I call indigenous production. That'll be $1 billion, $1.2 billion this year, we think. We think it'll get to 45% this year. That makes it the largest or the second largest indigenous market outside of North America, and certainly within 3 to 5 years, the local indigenous market in China will probably be larger than any other box office outside of North America other than China itself. So we saw great opportunities there. We see that, as Mike said before, great talent in that marketplace. It sort of reminds us a little bit of Hollywood after the war, after the Second World War, where there's lots and lots of talent, but there isn't yet the infrastructure of the studio system. So we spent a bit of time looking at the market and where it was and decided we wanted to be involved in finding the right partners in China, making films in Chinese for China. So our focus isn't on trying to make films to take to the world in English, because frankly, in North America, it doesn't matter what language it is, no one wants to see anything unless it's in English. So in terms of the potential for a business, and as Mike said before, we look at it as a business. We're looking to run a profitable business making films in China with the Chinese. So we do official co-productions. 95% of them are in Mandarin. We have a film coming out next year, it's sort of half Mandarin and half English, but that was a specific sort of exception.
This is the Keanu Reeves.
The Keanu Reeves movie coming out probably late April, somewhere between April and July. But again, picking up the point before, we have a long history in Hong Kong. We ran cinemas in Hong Kong, we did distribution in Hong Kong. And so our first really broad film is going to be the Stephen Chow Journey to the West, the Monkey King film coming out Chinese New Year next year. But that's a similar process in terms of finding the right partner, focusing on films that people want to see, stories that people want to hear, projects that you can sell into a marketplace. And that's the approach we're taking. And we are trying to bring our 58 years of experience in Hollywood, our 15 years making widely released films in Hollywood to the marketplace and bring the skills in. So not coming and telling them how to make it, but saying, hey, for instance, on the Keanu Reeves movie you just talked about, That's the first foreign co-production ever to be bonded. It's the first foreign co-production...
To get a completion bond.
Completion bond, yeah, a completion bond. It's the first co-production, we believe, that actually has collection accounts. So we're bringing those sort of disciplines and sort of experience that we've had both in Australia as a backer of Australian films and more globally as a producer of Hollywood films into the marketplace and seeing the opportunities there. Again, what Nansun said before, I don't believe that the world is out there saying, hey, I want to see lots of Chinese films. And I think that's part of the mistake of saying, let's come and make $50, $100 million films in English for the global market. Some people will do it and they'll be successful, but that's no different to making a film, if you like, about Japan or Australia or Sherlock Holmes, frankly. And so we're going to continue to make our Hollywood films around the world. I agree that there isn't any margin in the arbitrage between the distribution fees, as Mike rightly pointed out. A film that's marketed through Warner Brothers, let's take Fury Road, the next Mad Max coming out in a year and a half. We're going to do much better, even getting 25%, than trying to do it as a co-production. But we see lots of opportunities just in this market. There's very few markets that have $1 billion plus of box office, and probably within 2 years, $1 billion of theatrical revenues.
I'm tempted to ask you, what took you so long to get into China?
Well, we first went into China in about 1995. Yeah. We opened with Raymond a multiplex in...
Shenzhen.
No, Shanghai.
Shanghai?
In Shanghai. It was that basement that...
Yeah.
We opened and closed at the same year. We couldn't get product for it. We've been very successful running cinemas throughout Asia. I think we were focusing on getting our Hollywood film business going, and once you get to a certain stage, you can only release so many pictures a year. We started looking around the world for emerging markets. Mm-hmm. And you'll know, of course, that there's the BRICS, there's Brazil, Russia, India, China in terms of the growth, but I think the best opportunity is China. Remember, you've got 12,000 screens with 600 million people in urban centres in China, delivering about $2.6, $2.8 billion of box office, compared to America, where you've got 255 million people with 43,000 screens, delivering somewhere between 10.5 and 11 billion. And the entertainment options are much greater in the US than in China. So from a purely business perspective, we think there's great opportunities.
Is there a sense that you also waited to watch other people make mistakes in China? You mentioned trying to export Chinese language films worldwide and there not being a market for that.
Well, we've seen that through our distribution business in Australia. We probably distribute 60, 80 films a year in Australia. We bring Warner Brothers pictures, our pictures, things like The Hunger Games we distribute, but right down to foreign language films. And we've got quite a bit of understanding about different markets. We had cinemas in all continents at one stage. So we've learned a lot about the international marketplace. I don't really think it was that. It was really just bring our focus to it and understanding it and saying, hey, there really is a real opportunity. And it's only the last 5, 6 years that the market's become viable. I think that's the real point. And we started looking 2010, a couple of years ago, we opened our Beijing office sort of March, April last year.
Gotcha. So do you look at over your shoulder at people like Legendary East who want to make big English language pictures on Chinese themes? No. Or many of the other announcements which I referred to earlier on, people who want to make large English language Chinese themed movies? Bona may be part of that.
Yeah, completely different business model. In terms of where we're looking to make films, in terms of getting the most efficient, we make lots of films in Australia. The Australian government runs a 40% producer offset incentive. Anyone who wants to film, we welcome you to Australia. And we've probably spent with our partners at Warner Brothers $750 million the last 4 or 5 years, and you get 40% cash back. So it's a different driver. Our desire is to be in the Chinese market long term. We go into markets long term. We don't sell businesses very often. and we see an opportunity in and of itself. So our driver isn't financial for getting funds or making the arbitrage. Our driver is, hey, there's a great market, there's great skills, there's great stories, there's great talent.
Yeah.
We'll bring our experience and partner with people, which is the Village Roadshow way. I don't think we've ever been into a market anywhere in the world where we haven't taken a partner and worked with locals. So it's sort of part of our DNA.
Right. Slightly different question, and maybe Nansun, you want to jump in here. Do you see much interest on the part of Chinese producers to go out and fund co-productions in other territories where they may be a minority partner, where they're not in control of the picture? Or is it still all about the Chinese market at the moment?
I think the people, as you know, China, there are many affluent people now, and individuals of high wealth, and taking part in a movie, which is a one-shot deal. I always remind everybody, to them it's no big deal, because it's not like you're going to build a hospital and you have to go on and on for years and years. So concept of, let's say, investing $20 million US dollars, $25 million in something, it's not very steep for them, for some. But I think everybody wants to sort of be international now, I think. But they don't quite know how to be international.
Right.
But they know for sure if they only take a minority stake in a big U.S. picture, they would not have the control or the glamour attached to it. They'll be the little brother playing, not being allowed to sit at the grown-ups' table. So I think it's that mentality. So the tendency means that they would prefer to pick up some project where they are in control, they are in the majority. It's that kind of mentality more than a strategic thinking about, well, if I invest in an American film, the chances that my return is higher, etc. I think it's less a business consideration, but more this kind of mindset.
Mm. And what about at the sort of the art house level and the indie level? Because we've talked very much so far about commercial films and running film as businesses. I mean, do you not see Chinese filmmakers wanting to go out and make co-productions with, I don't know, Lars von Trier in Europe or someone like that?
I think in the art house, in fact, in China before this very commercialization, there are only two kinds of films: art house films and propaganda films. Right? There are no commercial films, and so for a lot of the young directors, their aspiration was to make a film and win at Cannes or Venice or something like that. So during these last 10 years, with this transition going on, I think the art filmmakers were in great pain. A lot of them, if you ask them, do you want to make a commercial film? They would say yes, but they still make it artistically and hope that it's a commercial success. And I always tell them, don't do that. It's okay to say you want to make an artistic film. So because of this kind of way of thinking, they are very, very, if they are still making art house films or independent films, they want very much to have their stamp. So it's not the kind of thing that they would want. They would tend towards thinking, not partnership thinking at all. No partnership. They want their stamp on the film.
Yeah, but the thing about the Chinese market is that the economics of it doesn't, we make films with a budget from about $2 million to $20 million in China, and the majority of them under $10 million. And so there is more scope, and P&A is virtually non-existent. So there is scope to make more independent, more, if you like, more arty or more relevant films in China than, let's say, in Hollywood. If I make a film in Hollywood for $40 million, which is a cheap film, as you know, I'm going to spend distributing that in North America and worldwide. If I'm doing a wide release, I'm going to spend at least that or more distributing it.
Yeah.
In China, you can make a film for, well, a good example is Bill Kong's Cold War. It's the second or third biggest film in China this year. It's the biggest film in Hong Kong. That cost an amazingly small amount of money to make. They make that film
by Hollywood standards.
If you make a film in Hollywood,
So
that film in Hollywood would be $40 million, $50 million.
Right.
Because there was a publicly announced figure.
I know. We're an investor in the film, so
I see. Okay.
But the cost of the film and the power, and that's what really attracts us. What you see on the screen is just amazing, and that's what, when we talk about the talent and the capabilities in this market, are just
But you see, Cold War is a very commercial film.
Yes.
So in terms of, when you say commercial film, in terms of the budgets for the commercial film versus the budget in Hollywood, it still makes sense sometimes.
Yes.
But for the art house films, they can't even get distributed in China.
I think that's the problem.
It's
You've got
very
600
crowded.
films a year being made in China, 200 may get released. And the only way you will make money in China is on your theatrical release if you're a Chinese enterprise.
Yeah.
But that's no different to Hollywood. I mean, in Hollywood, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films made every year that never get seen. And, you know, the people you represent, the people I partner with, we make up 85% of the box office.
Every film we make gets released.
Yeah.
It's a business.
Yes, but that's, I just see much more scope in China to be able to have that happy marriage of proper artistic direction. Yes, you've got to have a proper partner. Yes, you've got to have a distributor. But there's the marketplace for it, we think.
But the big difference is in China, 90% of your revenue will come from theatrical.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Hollywood, it's 20, 30%. The rest comes from the long tail. There is no long tail, not even a short tail
No,
in China.
we greenlight all our movies based on box office
Right.
only. And we still think that there's...
So I think that, you know, that some of these wonderful films that go out to the festivals do very well and get the producer banned are terrific. And if they're funded and they can make another film, that's great. But I remember meeting you know, an art house producer in the States, and he said, look, my number one goal, even when I make an art film, is to at least pay back the investor. So they'll invest in me to make another film. And you know, if you get lucky and you get it right, then obviously it can be a good day at the office. More chance, I think, in America than in China right now.
In the last few years, we've seen Hong Kong films. Almost every Hong Kong film is now a China, Hong Kong something co-production. I'd say 90% of Hong Kong films are now made with Chinese money in some shape or form. Is that now going to happen to the rest of Asia as well, as everybody else throws themselves at China to co-produce with them?
Not necessarily so. I think because Hong Kong's history with China and many historical reasons make that. So I think when China started, I think in the region at the time, let's say for the last 20-odd years, they were the only Chinese language filmmakers who were very professional and very savvy and understand the rules in the world are Hong Kong filmmakers. So naturally, when China opened up, that would be the natural cooperation. In other parts of Asia, I think they are also looking for Hong Kong producers and directors to work with them to bring that to the next level, with the exception of Taiwan, I think now. But Taiwan is there's a surge in Taiwan filmmaking, and there's a lot of new talent. But they're not quite. I don't think they don't want to, but I think they make very, very Taiwanese movies which are not very exportable, with the exception of, let's say, Apple of Your Eye, Scenic Ballet, a few. Compared to the number of films being made, it's still a very low percentage. So they have less of an international outlook, so to speak. Whereas Hong Kong, because of such a small territory, we've always had to have a very international outlook, otherwise we could never pay back our films, which is the same. My principle is always, don't lose money, then I can keep going. You know?
And it's the only way into China. It's the only country you can actually produce films out of, and after a period of time be able to make films in China other than by co-production. So it's a natural gateway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Actually, you know, in the last year, there's kind of a little, you know, Hong Kong filmmakers, you know, let's fight back and make some Hong Kong movies. So, you know, like Bulgaria.
We've seen that, exactly.
And, you know, all that. I just made a movie which would never get released in China. It's a very small budget, very arty movie.
Do you have Chinese money in it?
No Chinese money.
Not even as an investor?
Sorry?
Not even as a passive investor?
No. I have Agnes B in it.
No, but I was particularly wondering because I sometimes talk to students here in Singapore, and they all sort of now focused on making Chinese language movies, whereas before they might have made more English language movies. And we're seeing more Chinese language movies being made in Malaysia, again with a half an eye to the China market. You don't see that as a trend?
I think they are all trying. I don't see it as a... Firstly, Malaysia now is also moving very quickly and making Bahasa movies. But Singapore and Malaysia has always been traditionally not had a huge film industry, so they're not huge numbers. And so I think it's very obvious that they would want to access the China market. But in terms of what each party can contribute, means that, I mean, I'd say Jack Neo is a very successful filmmaker. He makes a very Singaporean movie, and he's very successful, so I'm sure he would want to, he's a friend, I'm sure he would want to access the China market, but what his expertise, how can he contribute towards making a Chinese language movie which would be a big success in China? I'm sure it can be found, but it's not a very obvious solution.
You're looking at me like you
No,
want to say
I was going to say, again, they're going to have to do it as a co-production because there's no way they're going to compete with the Hollywood movies for the slots, whether it's revenue share or whether it's flat sales. We fill that up, basically. Yeah. Or it gets filled up out of Europe or out of
fairly
Australia.
or unfairly.
Fairly or unfairly. There is some quota that's non-US, but they'll take films from Australia. Happy Feet 2, for instance, came in as under the quota system, but as an Australian film.
Yeah, and working title from the UK can do the same kind of thing.
Exactly, and a few So I think there's a real uphill battle for Malaysia or Singapore or other countries in the region, unless they're co-productions.
But I think the opportunity, and you're talking to students, is there is a future there. China is going to be such a big marketplace that they're going to be able to get in at not just the ground level, but quickly advance if they're any good. Whereas maybe in a smaller marketplace, it's going to be tough. But you get into China, you're going to have opportunities.
Great opportunities for them to make them there.
Exactly.
But
to be involved in filmmaking in China because you speak the language.
Yeah, I said that too, to the recommendation to the MDA panel, because in Singapore you never be able to, it would be very advantageous for your filmmakers to be involved in Chinese language films, bigger ones, so that you get the expertise and you can use it here. And one of the examples I cite is about 2.5 years ago, we were planning to make our first big budget 3D movie, and then I started looking, and obviously in Asia the sort of high technology countries are Japan and Korea, but actually they hadn't started having any trained crew yet. Then I found 2 companies in Taiwan who could provide service, but there were some. So because of I'm always quite close to Singapore, and I asked a very good friend of mine here, do you have a good 3D crew? And I'm being just very honest. I'm not being derogatory or anything. Because when I said to my unit, I said, oh, let's go to Singapore. And they go, Singapore? For, very advanced 3D crew. But actually, because of what your government did, they sent this fellow, a Singaporean, and for training in the 2 major systems available then in the world, the American system and the German system. And now, the rest is history, because the fellow is called Kevin Lau from Widescreen Entertainment. So, and then also one of your advantages, first is the language. Secondly, Singaporeans are known to be not troublemakers. We put a crew together now in China. Every day on set, there are about 500, 600 people. And it's very difficult to have everybody blend in seamlessly. And I knew that the Singaporeans would blend in very well, and they speak English, they speak Mandarin. So actually he came and worked on my first 3D martial arts movie, which was released last year, called Dragon Gate Inn. And actually, before we started shooting the film, it was such a big budget film, and I wanted to be sure, we kind of rehearsed and shot a small movie. And I brought in the stereographer from Avatar, Chuck Comiskey, who was very nice and, sort of said that you're doing the right things, but here are some tips, And so now, since then, Kevin has become very famous, and he's going around in Korea and shooting 3D movies.
I'm going to stop the discussion here now, and I hope the lights will come up, and I hope there are some wandering around microphones and some questions. I haven't planted a question in the audience today. I should have done, perhaps. But in that case, I need a volunteer. Who's got a question? And we can't see you, so you have to wave furiously. And there's also the opportunity, I'm told, to SMS questions. And here's one that we prepared earlier. Is it necessary to go through China Film Group Co-Production Corporation in order to make a co-production film? Nansun?
No. There are many entities now that you can work with, people who are licensed to do co-productions. There are many private companies. Of course, you can go through China Film or Shanghai Film Group, but then you have to have a Chinese partner who has the license to do co-production, and they'll do the application for you.
But those can be private companies now?
Can be many private companies. There are at least, hundreds, And the 2 largest privately held companies, Bona Film Group and Huayi Brothers. And then there are a bunch of others behind them who has about 6, 7, 8 years experience. like Galloping Horse, LETV, and Light, I don't know, Stella, who else? You know, there's a whole bunch there. And after that, there are many who has been around 2-3 years, you know. So lots of entities.
I think one of the most important things to remember, though, is the China Film Group has 51% of the circuits in China. So whoever your partners are have to have that good relationship.
Well, that's a distributor.
Yeah, the distribution side.
So that gave someone time to think up a question. Is there one in the room? There's one over there. Can we get this person a microphone, please?
Somewhat similar question. Is it necessary to go through SARF to get approval for co-production, or are there other ways of getting co-production terms, as perhaps DMG seems to be trying to do in China these days?
Thank you.
Are you talking about getting your production approved or the terms of the co-production?
I guess both.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of the co-production, that's a commercial negotiation. In terms of getting a shooting permit and a screening permit, it's soft.
You would have a Chinese partner, then you go through a company called China Co-Production Services, which technically is supposed to be a service provider, but it's a quasi-government agency. You make a submission to China Co-Production, and then they will give you notes or guide you through it. They take a fee, and then they will submit to the Film Bureau, which is part of SAFT, and they give you a shooting permit. You do the same thing when you finish your film, you have to go through the same route again in order to get a release, which is a distribution permit.
The problem that's come in the marketplace very recently is people trying to do rear end and reverse co-productions. It isn't a co-production.
Well, they're stick-on, what they call stick-on production.
And that's been a problem because the Vice Minister, Jiang Piming himself, has come out and basically said, you know, we're not going to allow this. So, you know, films like Looper, Cloud Atlas, you know, have all recently run into...
Iron Man 3.
Yeah, well...
We'll see.
We'll see. That's one of my members, and I'm sure they're working through that, and scripts are always pre-approved. But in terms of Cloud Atlas and Looper, those were two films which got caught at this particular juncture as, you know, are they a co-production? But, you know, a film like Bait is a co-production. You know, so at the end of the day, you know, it is the relationships in China.
Yeah, but I think they used they might have used the Australian co-production treaty. There's a treaty as well. There's treaties as well, which sort of are official co-productions. Are difficult to get under, but once you get under it, it's a slam. It's basically you're done. I think the thing that is important is that if you want to make a co-production, the commercial terms you do with your partner in China is fine. You can't have more than 50%, obviously, but you get your script approved beforehand, and that way you won't run into the same problems. I think it's going to be some time, particularly for an English sort of wide release film, that you'll be able to go and say, hey, well, I'm just going to do a scene, I'll do my plates in Beijing, right, or I'll do a scene and get approval later. I think that's a really long bow, and after the first one gets through, I think the government will stop.
The other thing, just to throw in the mix, you know, I mean, co-productions, of course, is what the topic's about, but, you know, under the WTO negotiation and the MOU that was arrived at, you know, there's a clause that if you distribute your film through a non-government entity, you can negotiate any terms you want.
You mean for
your release of your film? Yes. You're not stuck with a revenue share. You're not trying to manipulate yourself to be a local film, so you get 43, 45. You know, once there are other people who are licensed to distribute films, and Yudong talked about that earlier today, that, you know, that's their ambition to be able to distribute films, you can negotiate whatever commercial terms you can, as long as it's in line with similar markets, and of course the similar market would be America, based on the sheer size of the Chinese market. So, you know, the next 5 years, and again, Yudong referenced that, is going to be an interesting time there, amazing opportunities. But I come back to, you know, that relationship, getting in there, investing, having, you know, successes and failures are going to happen, but having relationships that you can work the long term is what's going to pay the dividends going forward. Say, the studios I work with, you know, we do 2 or 3 co-productions in China a year, have done historically for the last sort of 10 years.
Great. Is there one other question? Oh, there's a couple more. I don't know who's got the microphone. I can't see. There's 2 or 3 people down on this side.
A number of European production houses are now looking to Asia, and particularly Asian film finance, as a sort of lucrative area to mine, so to speak. Is this feasible or is it nonsense?
Well, feasible in what way?
Coming to Asia and looking for money because Europe's got none.
Well, it depends if the project is feasible and whether you can find somebody who can agree with you on that point of view. I mean, there's certainly a lot of money available in China. You know, usually filmmaking internationally has a lot of financial structures in place, but believe it or not, on very, very high budget films, it's all pure equity money. You know, here's the cash, go make the movie. Yeah. So the money is available. It depends on whether your project is attractive to the investor and whether he agrees on your point of view. You know?
I think you said it before, the Chinese, when they look at investing, I mean, a lot of people in Hollywood have tried to come to China to see it as the next dumb money, if you want. And I think the thing that we would say, having worked in Asia for so long and worked in the Chinese film market for the last couple of years, there's very little dumb money in China. We talk to people all the time, the big guys, the people with lots of money, the strategics, and they turn around and say, well, I don't want to invest in a slate deal in Hollywood because it'll get shoved at me, but I know that I should be selecting, but I can't select because I don't know. So I think there's been a lot of interest, and they pulled back pretty quickly because they know what they don't know. So I think that the global film industry looking to China and saying, hey, here's the next set of, whether it's Korea, whether it's German TV stations, whether it's Wall Street, I don't think China's ever going to be that. I think people will emerge out of China potentially and buy a studio. That's possible. But they're not going to just give us money and say, hey, go away and spend my money and let me be the next 5-year cycle. We don't think it's going to happen.
I'm going to stop it there. I know there are more questions, and I regret that, but we've got big flashing signs on our screens saying time's up, and we've got 2 more sessions to come. So please don't go away. Keep those questions, and I'm going to thank my panel, Mike, Nansun, and Greg. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.